Most people think the huge metal anchor is what keeps a cruise ship from floating away. But that's not the real secret. These floating cities weigh hundreds of thousands of tons, yet they're held in place by something that looks surprisingly small. Here's the truth almost nobody knows. If you just dropped the anchor into deep water, it would do almost nothing. In fact, if you pulled it the wrong way, you could even damage the ship. So how do captains know exactly where to drop the anchor and how much chain to release? And how do they lift a 20-ton piece of steel that's buried deep in the ocean floor? Today we're going to reveal the real engineering behind cruise ship anchors. It's not mainly the anchor that holds the ship still, it's the massive weight and friction of the heavy steel chain lying on the seabed. One single link of a cruise ship's anchor chain can weigh more than 130 kilograms. The entire chain can stretch over 300 meters and weigh between 60 to 120 tons, often much heavier than the anchor itself. When the captain decides to anchor, he doesn't just drop the anchor. He carefully releases a long section of this heavy chain across the ocean floor. This creates a curved shape called a catenary. That curve acts like a giant shock absorber. When wind or currents push the ship, they first have to lift tons of steel chain off the bottom before the force even reaches the anchor. By the time the pull arrives, the chain is almost horizontal, which forces the anchor's flukes to dig even deeper into the sand or mud. Captains use a simple rule called scope, usually 5 to 7 times the depth of the water. In 20 meters of water, they might release 100 to 140 meters of chain. In rough conditions, they use even more. In very deep oceans, most cruise ships simply cannot anchor. The amount of chain needed would be enormous and could damage the ship's equipment. That's why in the middle of the Pacific, they either drift or use computer-controlled thrusters to stay in place. When the anchor first hits the bottom, it just lies on its side. The ship has to slowly move backward, so the chain pulls the anchor horizontally. This force makes the flukes dig into the seabed. The harder the ship pulls, the deeper the anchor buries itself, sometimes disappearing completely under the mud. That's how one single anchor can hold a ship weighing hundreds of thousands of tons. When it's time to leave, a powerful machine called the windlass slowly pulls the heavy chain back in. As the angle changes from horizontal to vertical, the anchor finally breaks free from the seabed and is pulled back into its pocket on the bow. Now you know the real secret of how these giant floating cities stay perfectly still. If you found this interesting, hit the like button, subscribe to Cruiser Secrets, and tell me in the comments, have you ever watched a cruise ship drop its anchor? Safe sailing, and I'll see you in the next one.